like to present you with our keynote speaker is Dr. Claude Begle. As a former member of the Swiss Parliament National Council and the Foreign Policy Commission, Dr. Begle is a politician with a strong sense of corporate social responsibility. With extensive experience in public policy, regulatory aspects, and PPPs, Dr. Begle leads numerous high-profile initiatives in energy efficiency and projects with positive environmental and social impact. With PhD in economics, master in law and political science, Dr. Begle worked in Swiss Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Cooperation to Development, was a delegate of International Committee of Red Cross in Lebanon. Then he was heading subdelegation of Rhodesia and Zimbabwe, achieved senior ranks in Nestle, TNT, Geopost, Deutsche Post, DHL, and Swiss Post, and after which he has founded Symbio Swiss and Swiss Newater. Symbio Swiss company purpose is to participate in the global reflection on environmental topics, climate change, energy supply, and efficiency. In his speech, Dr. Begle will address the question of the supply of green energy as part of the SDG pluridisciplinary approach. He will stress the need for bondage between the various goals, as well as between R&D, innovation, and venture capital. This is with my great pleasure. I would love to invite Dr. Begle on stage.
Thank you, Oksana. Thank you for your very inspirational speech. I think you are leading the charge like Greta Thunberg, but in a more smiling way. So thank you very much for what you do. It was beautiful and it touched me in the heart. So I'm really happy to be here. Thank you. The presentation I'm going to try to show you is about the Green Revolution, which is a mixture of creativity and being a change gamer. Next, please. Yes, the SDG. The SDGs cover 360 degrees, most sustainable development goals. The goal number 7, in particular, says ensure access to affordable, reliable, sustainable, and modern energy. That goal encompasses to reach 4 targets by 2030, a universal access to energy, an increased share of renewable energy, but it's not quantified, a doubling energy efficiency, and enhancing international cooperation, expanding infrastructure. The beauty of the SDGs is that they are all interrelated. You can't take one in isolation. So for example, industry innovation, which is the goal number 9, or responsible consumption are closely related. Finally, the goal number 7 insists on an integrated approach, a partnership for the goals. We will only make it if we have not only the government and the NGOs, but also the private sector. Finance, science, creativity. It's all together, and it's only if we are all together that we will achieve it. Next page, please. Fossil, nuclear, green energy. It's obvious that the renewable energies represent the future. Everybody says it. But the transition from fossil energy is more complicated than we expected. The COP in Copenhagen is a very good example. Real politics has prevailed, and the agreement on coal has clearly been insufficient. Due to the pressure of China and India, which are still very much coal dependent, it's understandable. Green is good, but for developing countries, economic development is a must. And you have to balance the two things. There is a double scissor. On one side, take Germany. No more CO2 emission. On the other side, get out of the nuclear. Then logically, it's extremely difficult in the time span which has been defined that the renewables would be able to catch up. Maybe a solution would be to have a kind of cleaner, not perfect, but cleaner nuclear energy, not only the fission, but the fusion energy. Next, please. The opportunities, we all know it. Hydroelectricity would be the classical one, especially in countries with rivers or mountains. Solar, where photovoltaic is taking more and more over from thermal. This is more in countries, it's everywhere, but very much in the country, a bit more in the south where you have a lot of solar. Wind turbines, a little bit more to the north, in the northern hemisphere, biomass. But you have, of course, all the rest. You have the circular energy. The big question is energy conservation. And that's where everybody is betting currently on hydrogen. Next. This is obvious. Now, what is less obvious are the risks in the green energy. You have first the lobby of the traditional energy providers. As you all know, in Copenhagen, everybody was surprised by the power of the lobbies. Then you have a cost and a very high level of uncertainty about the research. Will it take 1 year? Will it take 5 or 10 years to reach certain goals? Then it's a system where normally you have an initial investment, take, for example, the wind farms or the solar panel. You have an initial investment, and then you have a contract for 20 years, and you have the return over the 20 years. So it would represent on the financial market something similar to the bond market. But it's extremely unpredictable how the cost will reduce in the future. We know that the price of, for example, photovoltaic is going down and lower, but how much lower and how fast is a question. We need to adapt the infrastructure in order to have the recharges, for example. There is a big time gap between technological development and legislation. The legislator is always late versus what happened in the technique. And there is always a way to be a bit smart and to occupy the field before the laws is in place with electrical cycles, for example. Now, often the renewable energies are initially subsidized, which means that you have a very big role of the public sector. Now, who says public sector in certain countries mean, I was polite, I said deals, I mean corruption. And you may have unexpected changes in legislation. Some years ago in Spain, they had a very favorable legislation for solar and wind farms. People went to the stock exchange, borrowed, obtained the money, invested, and then the government changed and they changed the legislation. So there is a risk because you invest on day one and you have 20 years where you need political stability to recover. Next, please. It's an ecosystem where the renewable energies imply, of course, a very good research cluster, universities being together. And you have some of the research done by spin-off from universities and other by R&D of large companies. It's the normal flow of scientific invention. Then you go to innovation, which is a business model, the financing, the commercialization. Today, much money is available. A lot of money is available around the world. But VCs are mainly attracted by tech, the IT, artificial intelligence, internet, and bio and med tech. Those are the ones which capture most of the investment. Clean tech is also attractive, but it depends on the business perspective and the business model. There is a need to have, at the same time, a breakthrough technology and a disruptive business model, and watch the reaction of the incumbents, which sometimes are stronger than initially expected. They don't give up so easily. Next, please. Now I give you a case study. Swiss New Water is the company I'm personally heading. So I'm like most of the people in the panel, except that I have a whole career behind me, and I decided to enter into the startup world after the corporate career. So it's a Swiss technology company which is replacing toxic chemicals in the disinfection and cleaning. You have, as you know, tons of chemical products being thrown away to the nature and being extremely harmful. So we developed a high-tech machine, which is based on electrolyzed water process, which produces at the same time and on the spot 18 formulas with only 3 components: water, salt, and electricity. So the machine is sophisticated, but the input water, salt, and electricity. The outcome is amazing. 99.99% of viruses, including COVID, can be killed. Bacteria, fungi, algae. It's cheaper than conventional product, ease of use, and safe. Now, I'm not trying to make you a sales speech. I'm trying to show through an example what are the challenges of a startup. You need to convince the end user about the usefulness to adopt change. For example, that product is really excellent. Any microbiologist would say. But the cleaning staff, when they see that it looks like water, they have the feeling they didn't do their job. They would like that it has a smell, that it makes foam, that it's like the traditional product. And you can have a product which is even more efficient in microbiological terms and much better for the environment, but you should get rid of part of the flavors, part of the foam, part of those things which give a cleaning person the feeling she or he has cleaned properly. Then you have to convince investors. So that's what I think everybody is doing today. So on our side, we prepared a PPT and we managed already to attract some investors, and we continue. Need to be ready to deal with the incumbent and the regulators. This is a very important point because, for example, I worked in something which has nothing to see with the environment. I worked in the tobacco industry for some time. And it's interesting to see how tobacco industry has been doing everything to protect the cigarette. Now, they are very proud to kill the cigarette and to go for the e-cigarette because they make even better profit. So you have very often people who fight the new entrants, but at the same time, they prepare with much, much more means than the startup already a better replacement for their own product. So we have to be very cautious in each of the startups, how the incumbent will copy you and just take you over by doing the same in a much bigger way with all the cash they have. Next. Investment funds and impact fund. I think that seed money funding is amply available by government private origin. VC, which is a combination of money and know-how, represent the critical steps in funding at the initial phase of commercialization and I would say the first growth phase up to maybe 50 million revenue or something like that. Then the private equity and investment funds, again, it becomes relatively easy, but those people are mainly focusing on ROI. However, alternatively, you have the impact investment funds, which are growing, which is ROI, but a sense of purpose. So for example, in the case of Swiss Water, it's quite interesting. We are talking both to investment funds because the profitability is high and the sales to hospital, hotels, facility management, this is a normal commercial activity. But at the same time, we are talking to impact investment because we develop the machine so that we can go to the slum, we can go to the rural areas, and we can help the poor population. Remember, it's only water, salt, and electricity. So we can help the poor population with preventive health. And some governments, I'm working out of India, I'm calling you out of India, although I'm Swiss. For example, several of the state governments in India, we talk to chief ministers, they are very interested in introducing a technology like that in order to do preventive movement so that the people don't have to go to the hospital. So I think you always have in green energy to see if you want to go for investment funds or if you want to go for impact fund. Next, please. The last two slides. From the desert to the jungle. At the beginning, you start your journey. If you are a disruptive model, nobody follows you because there is the fear of the unknown. Then the incumbent fight back and play on the fact that the customers are shy, lack of curiosity, and especially don't want to be the guinea pig who tries before the others. For that, you need to have, of course, a good product, but maybe the communication plays as much of a role as your product itself. Comes an inflection point where suddenly the crowd follows, and that crowd will try to overtake you. Very often, the real inventor is not going to be successful, but the second who have come just after the inventor is the one who will score. the goals. You need to grow enough to follow. And again, what I said, the incumbents, if they realize that they will not be able to fight the technology, then they will overtake it, preempt, and heavily invest in it. So it's important, for example, in our case, we are perfectly well with what we did and we can survive with that. But we think we have to grow fast so that when there will be a general wake up, we would have a size not to be destroyed. We have to have reached a stage where the large multinationals, well, they would respect us because we would have occupied enough time before they can do it. Next and last slide. We are moving, I think, from a Western-centric to a true global world, also in the field of startups. Companies used to be headquartered in the USA and in Europe, or in Japan, sometimes Korea. The rapid rise of Asia has changed the game. China, we all know, but never forget Japan, which is still the third economy of the world. India, which is very solid. Korea, South Korea. And also all those intermediate economies. Russia is not to be neglected, Brazil. And you have a lot in Africa, you have one or two. Everywhere you see economies which create very strong startups. Sometimes very small countries like Israel, for example. So intermediate economies are growing fast, and not only because they are raw material or energy supplier, they all invest in innovation. I was really surprised, even in some communist countries, to see how much they are putting efforts to go in an economy of the knowledge, innovation. So the people who are in the lead in California, in Boston, in some other places, watch, because the others are really waking up. They are not just copying, they're really waking up. I'm amazed in China or in India to see the thousands of startups and the vibrant they are. So India is an example because now I choose, what we did, I think it's quite interesting. We created a company in Switzerland, developed it a bit in Europe. Then we had the, if I may say, courage to come to India and to do our demonstrator in India. So we invested, we find a very good local partner, Forbes Marshall in Pune, and we established our base in India. Not only the factory, but also, I'm nearly at the end, but also the R&D. And between the Western scientists and scientists from Asia, we can have an incredible good combination. Top brains, low cost, and even a lot of export potential. So in short, what we need is to think global, to establish not country by country, but I think the future will be to establish startups with multicultural teams. I wish you all a very, very good conference.
Sorry, I'm on mute. Dr. Begle, thank you so much for your wonderful, informative speech. We are really thankful to you for actually joining. I know how busy you are. It's been incredibly difficult to catch you. You're kind of all over the place. So I'm really grateful for you to take time and come and join here tonight. Thank you for your wonderful presentation. I hope our audience found it interesting. Thank you so much.